Hi everybody, welcome to season 3 of Popcorn Therapy with me, Julie Peters. I'm a therapist and I have a background in studying literature, writing about literature and pop culture in general. So I'm bringing those two worlds and sometimes other worlds as well to this podcast where we talk about movies and TV shows and think about like what they mean to us personally, emotionally, and also culturally. And so I'm really excited to kick off this season 3. My good friend Marcelle Kosman, who is the co-host of one of my genuinely favorite podcasts, which is called Material Girls. It's a little bit more of an academic look at pop culture, but it is so fun and it's just a great way to like really think deeply about these things. It is February, which is Valentine's month. And so we're doing Heated Rivalry, which is a romance that absolutely exploded beginning at the end of November, just a couple of months ago. It's been a huge, huge success. And if you haven't watched it yet, please, what are you doing with your life? Go watch it, go finish it, and then come back and listen to this conversation. Partly because you must watch the show, but also because there are some heavy spoilers ahead in this conversation. I also want to let you know that it's a pretty explicit conversation. We do have some explicit language. This is not safe for work, depending on your workplace. If you have littles around, you might want to put your headphones on. Most of the spoilers is a little bit later on. The explicit stuff we get into pretty fast because this is a pretty explicit show. Sexuality is a big part of what we're going to be talking about as we talk about this show. So with that being said, please enjoy this conversation with Marcelle Kosman on the phenomenon that is Heated Rivalry. All right, so welcome back to Popcorn Therapy, everybody. I am so excited to have Marcelle Kosman with me on our episode on Heated Rivalry today. I've been wanting to have Marcelle come for a while. Marcelle, how would you like to introduce yourself? What do you want folks to know about you?
I want folks to know that I'm a contract instructor at the University of Alberta. That's my day job. But I'm also one of the owners of Witch Please Productions, which is our burgeoning feminist media empire. But we
Sounds
make
right, yeah.
we make podcasts, and I'm the co-host of Material Girls, which is a scholarly podcast that uses critical theory to understand the zeitgeist.
And I've mentioned Material Girls many times on this podcast because here we talk more about the content. It's more my therapist perspective and other perspectives that come in. But if you enjoy this kind of, breaking down and getting into pop culture, Material Girls is so good. It's definitely, despite like nothing to do with Marcelle being a close friend of mine, I love that podcast. It's one of my top.
Thank you, Julie.
I'm not just buttering you up, I promise.
This is a good way to start, though.
Okay, so Heated Rivalry. What is happening? Heated Rivalry. I started watching this show over the holidays. Mm-hmm. And, when I saw it, I think my husband had mentioned it. He's like, this Heated Rivalry thing. I was like, I don't know. It's a picture of two hockey players. Like, why would I watch that? Looks so boring. Mm-hmm. 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 And then learning more about it, I'm like, okay, that sounds interesting. And several of my mostly straight, mostly female friends were telling me, like, you got to watch the show. It's so good. Yeah. And I started watching it and was staying with my parents over the holidays. And I'm like watching this show in the corner, kind of being like, oh my God, what's going on? Why am I watching this like gay Canadian hockey show? Like, what's going on? And it has absolutely exploded. I think it came out at the end of November. Yeah. And since then, I saw some interesting statistics about it where it's like the most watched original Crave show ever. And one thing that blew my mind is that 30% of people have watched it more than once. Like if you've watched it once, you watch it again. Yeah. And 15% of people have watched it more than 5 times.
That's
like,
incredible.
People are obsessed with this show. I at first wasn't sure if it was just my algorithm, but everything on Instagram and TikTok is just these two beautiful actors just hanging out, talking to each other, clips from the show. Like, people are obsessed with this movie. So tell me about your experience with it, how you came across it, and what you think is going on. Wherever you want to start.
Oh boy. I mean, so I'll tell you the sort of cute version of how I started watching it. Witch Please Productions is a Canadian and American venture. So I have colleagues who are American, and two of them had been watching it and had said, Marcelle, we think you would really like the show. I'm sort of the resident hockey jock on our production team, and
not me.
And I know, I mean, also, like, not me. It says a lot that I'm the hockey jock, and they were like, yeah, like, it's this queer hockey romance. My colleague Gabby said that she dropped her crochet the first time they started having sex because she was just like, whoa. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe I will watch. But I think, like you, I didn't know anything about it going into it. I hadn't read the books. I hadn't heard the buzz about the show. And then, like, 2 minutes into the show, I'm watching for the first time, and the words Regina, Saskatchewan come on the screen, and all of a sudden I'm screaming because I'm like, Gabby, why did you bury the lead? Why didn't you tell me that the show is Canadian? I simply cannot have my American colleagues telling me, a scholar of Canadian literature and cultural production, about a Canadian show. And so I was immediately obsessed. So I start watching on December 3rd. The first 2 episodes are out. I watch both of them, obviously, in a single sitting. That second episode ends with the absolutely devastating, we didn't even kiss. And I'm like an absolute wreck. So then December 5th is when the 3rd episode is released. But this one introduces Scott and Kip. So there's no resolution whatsoever to we didn't even kiss. And so I'm having a panic attack. So I buy the first 2 audiobooks so that I can just, like, get into it and find out what happens. And I managed to get through, I get through the first one, and then I get through, I think, almost the entirety of the second one before episode 4 even comes out a week later. And for folks who are listening who are also considering listening to the audiobooks, it's really important that you know that the narrator uses a voice for Kip that is, I would argue, a hate crime. Like, it's so awful. It's supposed to be like a Brooklyn accent, but it actually sounds like he's making fun of people with developmental disabilities. So I would actually really recommend not listening to the first audiobook. The second one, so that one is called Game Changers. I would recommend not listening to that. But the second one, Heated Rivalry, which is the Ilya and Shane romance novel one. that one's okay. It's okay. Anyway, oh my God. So obviously I was completely obsessed. I fell absolutely in love with these characters. I had so much emotional investment in their budding relationship.
Yeah, so the obsession was fast and hard.
It was fast and hard. Yes, Julie. Yes, it was.
But consensual.
But deeply, deeply consensual. Yes.
Deeply consensual.
Yes.
I just have to say, that show is not only Canadian, it's highly, delightfully Canadian. Like, recognizably Canadian. There's some Canadian jokes in there that are really great. And I found out on doing the research I was just looking up a little bit more information about it for our conversation today. A girl that I went to university with, Shayla Hunter, was the intimacy coordinator for this show. And, as soon as I found that out, I was like, okay, I didn't know that she became an actor and an intimacy coordinator, but yes, that totally fits for her. I bet she was wonderful. And I feel like one of the things that, there are lots of theories going around that we can talk about why people are getting so obsessed so fast and hard with this show. But I think for me, one of them was definitely the way the sexuality was expressed, which was tender and very hot, like definitely very like passionate and so on. But I feel like there are so many romances that we've seen, like, if we take, I don't know, just the random example of 50 Shades of Grey, it's very like there's a huge power dynamic between the two characters, and a lot of the sexual tension comes from that power dynamic. And in this show, we see consent being expressed in a way that is still hot. It doesn't ruin the mood. It's not totally boring. Like it feels like a very natural human beings connecting with each other kind of way of expressing consent, which I just don't think that we see that very often.
I totally agree. Yeah. And absolutely, like the way that they so naturally fold that constant sort of checking in, that constant communication about what each person wants is so. It doesn't just feel natural, it feels very sexy in a way that I think maybe I don't know if it's just that our generation we were raised to think that like it had to be awkward and uncomfortable to talk about what it is that you wanted. Right. And anytime I've heard somebody say like, well, you can't ask for consent because that would ruin the mood, that really tells me that they've never had sex with somebody who asked what they wanted, or who like asked like, can I do this? Because it is so incredibly sexy to have somebody say like, can I X your Y? Like it's so
totally.
And so to have this show like with these two extremely strong masculine like butch hockey players, like, and not even just Ilya and Shane, but also Scott and Kip, right? Like the scene when I think it's like Scott who picks Kip up off the counter and is like, can I fuck you? And he's like, yes. And it's just so thrilling and delightful.
And I think, one thing I really loved was that those roles are reversed in that relationship at a certain point as well. The other asks, can I fuck you? And it's absolutely, right? It's like an absolute yes. And, I'm not an expert on this because obviously I'm not a gay man, but I feel like the way sex is expressed in culture, and I feel like this is maybe across sexualities, but so much of the time we see sex expressed kind of incorrectly. Like if you think about, I'm thinking back to even some episode of Sex in the City or anything, like you'll see heterosexual intercourse where, it's just like, okay, we're going to have sex and then it's happening. Like it's hard, intense intercourse, like without any lead up to it or any foreplay or anything. And, something that we know about many people's bodies, but, women's is that it can take a little bit of time. And like if you start like that can be really painful and uncomfortable. And I think that, people who've had sexual trauma, especially, it's quite interesting to see these moments of consent and these moments of foreplay and like leading up to something, right? Yeah. So what I'm getting around to saying is that I feel like there's a lot of it's not even conversation. It's like the lingo around gay sex is often like, this person's a top and that person's a bottom. And like, you have to fit into this sexual category and that sexual category. And I feel like that something about that, and again, I'm not an expert on this. I could totally be wrong in my instinct here. But I guess my sense of that is like, if someone decided for me, like who I was sexually and what that meant about what kind of sexual actions I wanted to do, I would find that incredibly like upsetting and limiting, and I feel like it would make it harder for me to express like I want to do this or I don't like that or whatever it is. And I feel like this show, like it not only expressed sexuality in that sort of normal human way that like this is how human beings actually do have sex, but also from that gay perspective where it was like, okay, anal sex is something you work up to. Like it's not something that you just do like the second you get alone with each other in the closet or whatever. And, I think that was actually quite beautiful to be seeing, because I feel like that's so much more representative. And again, I'm speaking as not a gay man, so I could be totally wrong here. But I guess from my human perspective, it feels like nobody was slotted into, like, nobody used that language throughout the whole show. Like, nobody was saying, you're this and you're that and you have to do this and you have to be into that. Like, you know, Shane was learning that about himself, right? And there is a moment where he says to his girlfriend, from girlfriend to girlfriend, right?
Yeah.
I think actually maybe I like being in this position more than the other one. And she's like, oh, that's so great. Like, I love that you're learning that about yourself. And it's not something that he knew right away. Like, it's something that these two kind of had to figure out in that dynamic together. And I feel like there's something like very humanizing about that experience.
Yeah. Well, I guess one of the, I hesitate to bring it up because anytime it's come up in my proximity, I'm always really mad about it. But I feel like as a result of that, I have to bring it up. But I have heard, not from anybody in my immediate circle, but like in seeing people's responses to this criticism that this isn't how gay men have sex. And the responses that I have seen have all been so like, okay, so on the one hand, well, like Bridgerton is also not how straight people have sex. Like, there are a lot of things about the sex of the show that are not realistic because it's romance. And so like, so for example, like we don't see Shane douching before his like first experience of penetration. Right. But like, it's also romance, so that's not the point. That's not what we're here for. It's not educational in that sense. I should say this too because my podcast Material Girls will have an episode about Heated Rivalry coming out in a couple of weeks. I think around Valentine's Day, I think was the plan. One of the things that the guest that we had on, one of the things that she talked about with respect to this criticism that like this isn't real sex, or this isn't a realistic depiction of sex, is like, okay, but like in no romance novels or no romance television series do we have women needing to like manage their periods. Do you know what I mean? So like there are so many parts of sexuality that we omit in order to focus on the stuff that is sexy in this sort of like kind of neat and tidy way, so that you can emphasize the pleasure and not have to focus on the work that often goes into getting ready to have sex. And in that sense, I think like, I actually nevertheless think that the show does a really beautiful job of like making sex seem realistic. I also think anybody who would critique the show and say like, well, that's not a realistic depiction of gay sex. Like, I'm sorry, is your sexual experience the only valid experience that like gay men have ever had sexually? Like that's absurd. It's absurd it would be absurd to like watch Bridgerton or watch 50 Shades of Grey and be like, well, that's not a realistic depiction of like BDSM, or that's not a realistic depiction of sex. And it's like, that's not what we're here for. We're not here for realism. We're here for a romantic fantasy or a romantic escape from like the day to day. I actually have a theory that in that first episode, before Ilya comes to Shane's hotel room, when Shane like puts on the suit, and then he's like, what am I doing? And he like takes off the suit. I'm like, there's no way he didn't douche. There's no way. There's no way. There's no way before his first sexual encounter with Ilya Rozanov, there is no way that Shane Hollander didn't douche, because if he goes to the trouble of putting on a suit and tie, not knowing what it is that he's supposed to be getting ready for, there's no way he wasn't prepared for absolutely everything.
Right. And I mean, it's interesting that you say that criticism has gone around. My experience of watching this is that I did feel like a lot of this sexuality was realistic.
Totally. I know. I felt the same way.
From my queer, female sexuality.
Yeah.
Which is that, and I'm thinking of a moment that I loved, actually, where after they had penetrative sex, I think, for the first time, Shane does say, well, now the bed's all dirty.
Totally.
And Ilya says, I'm going to go and have a shower now. And, like, they do kind of have that conversation, right? About, like, okay, there is a little bit of, like non-sexual labor that goes into this sexual experience. And I think that, from my perspective, from where I'm coming from, which is that queer-ish, straight-ish sexuality, having been with mostly men and so on, but also having been assaulted in my experience in my life, like having had non-consensual experiences, it was so nice to see the layers of that sexual relationship, like not just the layers of the emotional relationship, but the sexual relationship mirroring that, right? Like they get to know each other, they're flirting a bit, they make out a little, they start this, like it takes them time to get to that place of, a type of sexual experience that feels more intimate and more special, and like something that you're not just sharing with everybody necessarily, right? And so what I'm curious about that is that, especially if there are gay men who are saying that's not realistic, I'm wondering about this show, because there are so many straight or straightish women who love this show. Is it actually, I know it was written by a woman. I don't know too much about her perspective or the books, so maybe I'll have more to say about this. But, is this expressing like a more heterosexual romance just through male characters, right? Because I did kind of notice there is that dynamic of like Shane is a little bit more of the I don't know what you call it. He's got that sort of main character, like usually in a romance there will be the young woman who's like different from everybody else in some way, and whatever it is, and she's attracted to someone who's a little unavailable, which Ilya is definitely unavailable for a lot of it. He's kind of hot and cold, like, very Christian Grey, kind of like, I'll come and I'll blow your mind sexually and then I'll just disappear and you won't really know what I'm thinking, but actually the truth is that I love you. And like that's a fantasy that a lot of women have had that gets expressed in romance, which is, this unavailable man actually loves me really deeply, and that's, from a therapist's perspective, problematic because, I feel like we've been kind of trained to want to earn unavailable men, and that if we can earn those unavailable men, we can prove ourselves to be lovable, which does happen in this show, right? So am I actually seeing, like, is this show actually kind of made for me, as a straightish woman, seeing men behaving in these ways that are, taught to me in terms of what romance is supposed to look like. And so I can easily place myself into it without actually having to be in it, which is a whole other theory about women enjoying it because they're not part of it. And so on. We can get to that one. But yeah, curious what you think about that. Like, is this, just a fantasy for me?
I mean, I don't think that that's impossible by any means, but I do know a lot of gay men who love this show. I think that these things can coexist. I think that it can very much be a quote unquote female gaze type of perspective. So what little I know about Rachel Reed, the author, is that she came up as a lot of contemporary romance writers did. She sort of came up in the fan fiction community. And so she's writing in a tradition that I'm quoting the guest on my podcast. But she talks about it's a tradition of like men loving men romance, and it is predominantly written by women and by trans men and by non-binary people. So I do think that there is a real tendency there to retell these romance stories with an eye to the kind of tenderness that I think women writers and like non-masculine, non-male writers have been allowed to develop and craft over, the centuries of like women's writing, etc. So I don't think you're wrong about that. I do think that it is very much for us. But the way that I think it is for us is also in such a way that it's not exclusively like only straight women will find this appealing, if that makes sense. Like I think she is so, and again, this is, I'm going to echo your caveats. Like I'm talking as a cis woman here. Like I've never been in a gay male relationship. But I think she is so respectful of queer male culture, and so respectful of like the concerns in particular that like men in professional sports, particularly professional hockey, have about like stereotypes around masculinity and expectations. Like, she's able to hit on those things in a way that doesn't, I think, turn our male characters into caricatures of gay men. Do you know what I mean? Like, they're still so well developed. They're still so complex. They're still so interesting. So like even Ilya, who, like you say, is so emotionally withholding for so long, it just takes a little bit longer to like unwrap those layers. And for me, watching, I think part of what was so pleasurable about it was actually seeing him come to terms with his trauma and like talking through the things that make him sort of so standoffish and like so much machismo. And it's not Shane forcing him to open up to him, it's that he just does it on his own.
You know, one of the theories for why it's been so popular with straight women is that they're not represented in the sense that as a straightish woman, you can watch this and not have to put yourself into it in the sense of like seeing a woman doing a lot of emotional labor to try to earn this man. Like, Shane doesn't really do that. Like, to be fair, Shane doesn't try particularly hard. He just kind of shows up and like waits to see what happens, right?
He really does. It's so true. God, I love him.
Yeah, and he's often just like, you're an asshole. Like, why are you being an asshole?
Exactly. Yeah.
And he's just like, do you want me here or not? Like, what, either way, like, I just kind of want to know. Like, it's coming from that perspective as opposed to him putting a lot of effort into it, right?
That's right.
And I'm on a little bit of a theme in this podcast of sort of emotional labor and motherhood. I just finished doing a podcast with a friend on Night Bitch and If I Had Legs I'd Kick You, which is in one of the layers of that is just how thoroughly women have been trained, and people raised as women have been trained to focus on everybody's needs, take care of everybody else, have the responsibility for the family, all that stuff. And so I did think it was interesting, like, do people love watching this because they're watching men do this emotional labor, right? That being said, there are a few female characters who exclusively do emotional labor. I think, you know, like these sort of best friends and these, you know, whatever it is. Yeah. These women are kind of trying to encourage Shane and Ilya, like, it's okay if you're gay. It's okay if you like men. Like, you know, I forget her name. Rose, I think it is.
Rose, the girlfriend.
The actress. Yeah, the girlfriend that Shane is with for a while. She's so kind about kind of getting rejected by Shane instead of taking that to heart, which, like, let's be honest, if that happened to me, whether that person was gay or for whatever reason, I would still feel that it was like, well, you don't like me because I'm not attractive enough or whatever it is. Instead of that, she says, oh, don't worry, all my boyfriends have been gay because I've been in theater for so long, and like, it's okay, and I'm a safe space for you, and you can be that and all that. And I feel like she really does kind of bring that emotional labor a little bit to the table. Svetlana is doing that for Ilya at the same time. And I think another piece to that is that it was kind of sweet and a little frustrating to watch these men try to figure out how to communicate with each other, right? Because again, women and people who have been raised as women have been taught so much about emotional communication, verbal communication, who you can talk to, how you can talk to them. You know, women in some ways have kind of an emotional privilege where it's much more socially acceptable for women to gather in groups of other women or women-ish, you know, people on that feminine spectrum who could just like talk deeply about their feelings and their lives. And men don't have that cultural acceptance for that, right? Not that they wouldn't want to necessarily, but they're not trained to do that, and it's like considered weird or unusual, you know, for men to sit around like talking late into the night about their deepest feelings. And so, you know, it was kind of interesting and tender to see Shane and Ilya try to figure out how to tell each other, like, just what they were thinking and feeling. And I just loved that scene when Shane says, like, why don't you just tell me everything you're feeling, but in Russian, so that, you know, I won't understand it. There's like no threat here, but you can still have said it. Yeah. And, you know, what an interesting moment of emotional connection that like allowed Ilya his space and privacy while at the same time connecting and witnessing. Like that was, I mean, very male coded, maybe, right? Like maybe that's exactly sort of how, you know, someone raised as a man might want to be able to express is like privately and safely, but still being witnessed and cared about while they're doing that. Like I could kind of see that working, right?
Yeah, yeah, totally. And I think I'm also thinking about that scene when Shane comes out to Ilya and tells him that he's gay, and Ilya's like, okay, so what? And he's like, I need to tell somebody. Who else am I going to tell? and that was really like very similarly this moment of like these men like very imperfectly communicating with each other and then realizing, I guess in a way that mirrors them learning, like they obviously learn how to connect sexually first and then they learn how to connect emotionally after.
Right.
But in this way, in this conversation, they're similarly doing this thing where like they are trying stuff out and then actually just straight up communicating what they need. Like Shane is saying, I don't have anyone to tell. Can you please not be an asshole for 5 minutes because I need to talk to someone about this. And then Ilya holds him while he cries. And it's just like the most incredibly vulnerable, but with such minimal like verbal communication. I'm getting emotional just thinking about it. I forgot about that scene. Anyway,
and I think at the point that they have those tender moments too, like the first time they say each other's first name when they're sexually together, it's like this sort of moment of revelation for the two of them where they're like, whoa, that just got so much more intimate. Like after everything sexual that they had done before, to say each other's first names was like, that was a whole new level of intimacy between them. And then the other moment I think that really was just so sweet was the tuna melts, right?
Oh, I know.
When Ilya's like, I'm making you a tuna melt. And Shane's like, you're what? Like, what do you mean you're making me a tuna melt? Like, it's just this sweet sort of domestic moment, right? And that was, these levels of intimacy that, not that Shane wasn't a little freaked out about that, the sexual sides of it, like,
totally.
throughout. But I feel like those are the moments that felt even more impactful for him because they were tender and it's this sort of other layer of vulnerability. And I think that from a perspective of somebody who's like, especially in a hyper-masculine closeted culture like hockey, which I had never even thought of that before, but of course there are going to be gay hockey players. Like, of course. And how sweet that a hockey player came out after seeing this show. Like that sort of had a ripple effect in the real world too, where so many people are responding to that and so on. So, you know, and I mean, not that women, even if women and people raised to be women are, tend to be trained better to have these emotional conversations, it doesn't actually mean we're that much better at them, right? Like,
oh, hell no.
Still have those moments of vulnerability and like making mistakes and imperfect communication and try and get things across. Like, I think that's sort of humanly relatable as well.
Totally. And like being good at communicating verbally doesn't mean you're not good at being manipulative verbally. You know what I mean? And I know that for me, like when I was growing up, being able to manipulate my partners verbally was it was like one of the ways that I was able to like claim power in. I have the language for this now. I obviously did not have the language for this when I was a teenager, but like that was for me a way of like claiming power in a very asymmetrical like power imbalance relationship. And I think one of the things that the show does really well is provide us with, I hesitate to even say fantasy because the show is like, what is the fantasy? Like sexy rich men is the fantasy. It's like not there's
we
no
all want a cottage like Shane
yeah,
Hollander's
we all want a
cottage.
cottage, right? There's no, like, there are no castles, there are no dragons. Like, the fantasy is just wealth.
Right.
But that these characters are able to learn about themselves and learn about one another and learn to love one another in the way that they both need to be loved. In a space without. One of the things that I can't help but come back to is the way that so many stories about queer love and queer romance that are kind of mainstream successful, or maybe not mainstream successful, but like allowed to be in the mainstream, always have to have some kind of tragic element to them. So it's like they're overcoming a hate crime, or they experience a hate crime, or one of them dies, or one of them has HIV and it turns into AIDS and then they die. Like, or there's some other, like, they actually can't be together because of homophobia, etc., you know? And so the fact that these two characters are just able to be themselves in this very kind of realistic, low-key kind of way is so world building in a way, you know? It provides us with these scripts of possibility. Like, wow, what if we didn't reduce everything to these like cis heteropatriarchal tropes where like with the female characters, like they do a lot of emotional labor, but none of them is like the bitter, resentful girlfriend or the jealous wife or the scheming and conniving like sister. You know what I mean? Like they don't fall into those hateful tropes that that taint or poison this romance in some way. And I just think that that's so revolutionary. And it's shocking to say that out loud. It's wild to refer to that as revolutionary, but like that's kind of where we are.
I mean, yeah, I agree with you. And there was a clip going around of Esther Perel, who's that famous couples counselor, who was talking about heated rivalry and calling it a corrective experience, right? That, you know, being able to see, I watched it all on my own time a little after, you know, the last episode came out and everything. But, you know, there was the episode where, second to last episode, Shane invites Ilya to the cottage, right?
Yeah.
And he's like hopped up on anesthesia. He's like, you know, he's got a little lowered.
Will you come to my cottage this summer?
Yeah, it's just this very sweet like moment where that's been turned into, you know, songs and memes and things like that on the internet. People love that moment because it's so sweet, and it is his, you know, he's disinhibited, and so he's able to say like, come to my cottage, you know, it'll just be the two of us, it'll be private, we can just have this like fantasy like lovely experience together. And Ilya says, oh, I don't know, I don't think so. And then I imagine there was a gap, right, for people who are watching it in real time. They don't know, like, you have that week or so between finding out whether or not he goes to the cottage or not. And having watched any of the queer TV shows or films that you're talking about, you would think like, oh God, what horror is going to happen at the cottage? Like, how heartbroken is he going to be? Or how bad is it going to get? Or are the police going to come? Or like, it's, you know, like you're just thinking of it's going to be so horrible. But what happens is they go to the cottage, they have a wonderful time, and then Shane's dad discovers them. They come out to Shane's parents. They're lovely about it. There's that very sweet moment where the mom is like, I am so sorry you didn't feel safe to come out with me. And then they drive off into the sunset together. Like,
I know.
That is so sweet. And we know there's going to be a season 2, and like, we don't know, you know, how it's going to go if they come out, like what their plan is exactly, if they're coming out, what kind of, you know, resistance they're going to get and so on. But I think that was a surprise, right? To kind of see that it had this happy ending and that everything was okay at the end, and that being gay, I think if you look at it from the perspective of pop culture over the last, especially around the HIV epidemic and all that stuff, it's like being gay is a tragedy, and it's it's like something really bad that happened to you and that you're going to have to
Yeah.
suffer the consequences of that for the rest of your life. And to be able to see that doesn't have to be the case, it does feel revolutionary, right? It feels so including of the gay community just in life, like you can ride off into the sunset together. And you don't have to be, these stereotypes or, killed at the end of it or whatever it is. I think about horror a lot on this podcast, and I know you've done lots of stuff about that as well. But so often in horror movies, the social outcast will be one of the ones who's killed, right? Like it's like usually the queer person would be one of the first to be taken down in any horror movie. It wasn't horror by any stretch of the imagination, but I think that's what we're used to seeing, and here's a case where they get to be the heroes, and like how wonderful is that? Right?
Yeah, it's huge.
So one of my favorite moments in the show was the Scott and Kip interlude side quest. And it was so interesting to have this completely different, like, oh, we're with other characters now, like what's going on. And I think at the end of the episode where we meet Scott and Kip, like they fall in love, they have this great relationship, but Scott is saying, if you want to be with me, you have to be in the closet with me because I can't come out in this situation that I'm in, which is really hard for Kip. And at the end of that episode, I thought they had kind of broken up. I don't really know. I guess it wasn't that explicit, but things weren't going so well. And then there's this scene of Scott just watching Kip celebrate his birthday with his friends at this gay bar that they all go to. And he's just literally on the outside looking in, right? And it's sad.
Yeah.
And I think that moment is something that we've seen in romance before as well, where, we can be together, but only on my terms. We can be together, but you have to be, you have to pretend to be this thing. And it's another one of these ways where the fantasy and romance is that that couple gets to come out together as vampire or whatever the in the closet might be. And then of course there's the episode, I think it's the one right after that, where Scott comes out so publicly. He invites Kip onto the ice and kisses him in front of this huge audience of people. And I feel like I don't cry that often watching movies and TV shows unless I'm like horribly triggered and having a panic attack or something. But this was a case where I was full crying. Like, this was so beautiful and so sweet and just so emotionally incredible. Like, to have, moved through that and to see Kit be able to come out and for them to be able to be together. I think a lot of viewers felt really sad for Scott in that moment, right? Because it's like, okay, you're keeping your boyfriend in the closet, but also you can't be happy publicly. Like, nobody can know who you really are. And then to just have this really courageous moment of like, I don't care what happens with my career, I'm going to be who I am. Oh, that was just a huge highlight of the show for me, for sure.
Totally. Yeah. I think I think that this show did such a phenomenal job adapting the books. And so there are, I think, 6 books in the Game Changers series. And the first novel is about Scott and Kip. And so I think one of the challenges that the show had to get around was distilling the complexities of that relationship down into really like just 2 episodes, like not even 2 full episodes, but like 1.5 episodes.
Yeah.
And I think they did a really good job. All things considered, what the show isn't really able to do is get into the details of like how much it costs Scott to give up this thing that like this experience of being himself fully for the first time in his adult life. And like, it's also, the show is like, it asks us to believe that after one sexy night with Kip, he's like, why don't you just move in with me? And Kip is like, okay. Right. It doesn't happen like that in the book. They take it a little bit more slowly. It's very lesbian coded. They like Kip shows up with a U-Haul. Like, it's U-Haul, very, but what happens in the book is that Scott shows up at Kip's so Kip lives with his parents, as he does. He lives with his dad in the show. He lives with his mom and dad in the book. And Scott shows up at their house and apologizes to Kip and tells him that he doesn't care. He's ready. He wants to be with him. And he introduces himself to his parents. And the reason why that's important in the book is because lying to his parents is the thing that's the hardest for Kip. And
right.
And they do the thing where he's like, I'm not ready to come out publicly yet, but I want you to know who I am. I want you to know that I love your son, etc. And so then when he invites Kip onto the ice, it's still a surprise to him and to Kip, because he's sort of like, I don't know what I'm doing, but it feels right. We're going to do this. And so when I was watching, because at this point I had read the book, I had listened to the book so quickly. When I was watching, I was so amazed to find that even though I knew exactly what was going to happen, I still felt like I was on the edge of my seat. And there were so many ways that this show feeds into that positivity in ways that you don't necessarily notice on the first watch. But as they're sort of moving from Scott's perspective, beckoning Kip onto the ice, as they move to Ilya and Shane, like watching the Stanley Cup final in their separate houses or whatever. Then at one point the announcers were like, oh, this must be a lucky fan. What's going on here? And then when they start kissing, you hear one of the announcers go, good for Scott Hunter. Like there's just this full bellied, like, wow, good for him kind of. And that is the work of adaptation that makes me believe that adaptations are possible. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was so considerate and so thoughtful, and so like, what can we give to the people who have read these books so that it is just as thrilling for them to watch as it is for somebody watching who like this is their first time.
Yeah, so I would love to know so which category are you in? How many times have you watched the show? Like, are you in the 15% that watch it more than 5 times?
No.
The 30% that watched it twice? What number are we at?
I'm in the 30% that has watched it twice. And I often think about like doing a rewatch. I have a very unhealthy relationship with television, which maybe some of the people in that 15% also have, which is where when I start watching something, even if I've already seen it, I can't stop. Like, I am so susceptible to binge watching. I remember I messaged to our Witch Please Productions group chat. I was like, thank God only the first 2 episodes are out, because I can see myself like doing actual damage to my psyche by just like powering through every single episode, even though I only started at 11 p.m., you know? And,
something that we've talked about on this podcast before is like, rewatching has a relationship with anxiety, right? Binge watching is something a lot of people do to self-soothe. Yeah. And are there ever a lot of reasons to want to self-soothe today, right now, with what's happening in the world? And also, what a place to go to, right? Like, what a world to live in. If you are experiencing depression or anxiety, to be in this world where people can communicate with each other lovingly, take risks for each other. I mean, I've seen some sweet things out there about, the world is burning, but like, love is real. People having this relationship with heated rivalry where it's like, this is the place I want to live, right?
Yeah, totally. I would also, like, I would really, really highly recommend to you and any of your listeners who genuinely want more of this kind of content, like the rest of the books in the series, like they're all interconnected, and every time I have started a new one, part of my brain is like, do I really need to listen to another romance about another hockey player? But the ways that the different players are humanized is so wonderful. Like there's one it's called Tough Guy, and it's about this player named Ryan Price who has anxiety. He's like this really, really big guy. He's primarily like a defender. So his job on the hockey team is to beat up the opposing team when they threaten their his team star players. And the whole book, like, we basically open the novel with him struggling and failing to jerk off because of his anti-anxiety medication. It like makes it so difficult for him to maintain an erection and actually like come to completion. And so in navigating his romantic relationship, he's also navigating like having a sexual relationship with somebody and saying like, I'm probably not going to be able to come, and that person needing to be okay with that, and like and in this way that isn't shameful, and it's not the objective isn't, and now he's happy and can ejaculate anytime he wants. It's like, no, this is like an ongoing thing that they have to incorporate into their relationship. And it's just so it's so refreshing to be able to read a romance novel that takes those kinds of very real sexual complications seriously and treat them without shame, and treat them not as a problem to be solved, but as something that you can like incorporate into a very like healthy and happy and sexually gratifying relationship. So huge recommend.
Say that it's not representative of like real life sexuality, right?
I know.
Sure, I know. Not always, but like, yeah, there was I had a blip during the pandemic where I was writing an erotic novel. I think I told you about it.
Oh, I remember. I think about it all the time.
Do you?
Yeah, I do.
My agent, Robert Lecker, who we both know, was just very clearly like, he said it in a very nice way, but he was like, this is pretty bad. Like, this is... I've written so much nonfiction that he was like, this is a no. But maybe one day I'll pick it up again. I've been practicing my short stories with my goddess novels. But anyway, one of the things I wanted to do with that novel was have those kinds of moments, right? Where there's like mess, or, you know, where even just things like you never see anyone go to the bathroom in these kinds of, you know, movies and books and stuff. And I love that idea of, anxiety medication. Like, that's one of the reasons that it can affect your sexual performance or response or whatever it is. And, you know, I can relate to that from anxiety medication, but also postpartum and like, you know, hormonal shifts and all of those things. Like, it can really affect the way that you experience sexuality, and to have that represented and in a way that's still like a fantasy romance in terms of all those other things, like, I think that's really lovely. So I would love to know if there are just like other particular moments in the show that like were particularly resonant for you, or that you really remember, or that you want to talk about.
Do you remember a couple of years ago when there was a book talker who got into some hot water because she had been writing hockey romance about a real player for the Seattle Kraken? I was asked to talk about it on the Vancouver CBC morning program, and the host, for some reason, asked me what kinds of things did she write about this player, and the only thing that I had in my head was that the author had written that she wanted him, this real life player, to fuck her in all three of her holes, which I knew I could not say on the Vancouver CBC morning radio program. And so I stumbled my way through like, well, I didn't read it. So I can't really speak to that. Anyway, it was a disaster. I wish I could go back in time, but I can't. The thing that really stayed with me about that horrible experience that I wish I had been able to say is that when you're writing about real people, these are real people with like real material existence in the world. And so even just by slapping someone else's name onto that character, it's such an important it's such an important way to respect the personal life of the person who you are fantasizing about. And I think this was one of the reasons why I was a little bit hesitant to start watching Heated Rivalry. Like, I wouldn't have thought of myself as interested in hockey romance to begin with, but the fact that it had been kind of shaped for me by the trend among some folks of writing about real life players, despite their request that they not do that, made me really like reluctant to get into it. But I think I'm so just tickled by the way that Rachel Reed has so clearly and genuinely represented like the hockey rivalry between Montreal and Boston. Like we both lived in Montreal at the same time. Like it was impossible to escape. Like even though I am like definitely an Edmonton Oilers fan through and through, like I know about the team. I know like when members of the team are traded or put on waivers, I'm like aware and I pay attention. I have feelings about it in a way that I don't have those feelings about the Montreal Canadiens anymore. It's a struggle for me to like Ilya Rozanov, not because he's a cocky asshole, but because he plays for the fictional rival team of the Montreal Canadiens. The fictional Montreal Canadiens. So the Montreal Metros and the Boston Raiders. And like, right. There's absolutely no Montreal Metros merch that I have any interest in wearing. Whereas like the Boston Raiders shirt, for some reason, that Ilya is wearing in that final episode before he goes to meet Shane's parents. And Shane is like, can you change? Or like, that's not going to help or whatever. And he's like, oh, did they not know that I play for Boston? Like, I have such a fondness for that t-shirt and I like really want it, but I can't bring myself to wear it because the rivalry is so real. It's in my DNA. So I guess all of this is just like a really roundabout way of saying, I think for me, one of the most surprising and exciting parts of this series was the way that it like played, it like allowed me and made space for me to be a hockey fan and also a reader of romance at the same time in a way that shouldn't be impossible by any means, but like the fact that neither of those communities gets sidelined or neither of those communities gets like ridiculed even a little bit is, I think, just lovely. Just a lovely gift.
You're making it sound like hockey romance is a thing.
It is.
Sounds like it really is. This is a surprise to me.
It really is. Yeah, I didn't know, but it really is. It's a proper subgenre of romance.
And this
fiction.
is a subgenre that I'm assuming is consumed mostly by women. Mm-hmm. Okay,
consumed by and written by.
And written by women. Interesting. And it's usually male hockey players. Like, that's what we're talking about.
I don't know, actually. Like, it's not always men loving men. Like, there's lots and lots of examples of like straight hockey romances.
Okay.
Yeah, and that horrifying example of like wanting him to fuck her in all three of her holes, real book talker stuff. That was a M/F romance. Men slashing women.
Right. Okay, so that's interesting because there has been so much conversation about straight women being really into the show. Not that there aren't other people who are into it, and I've seen some very sweet, like, real-time reactions of straight men crying at that scene where, you know, Scott and Kip kiss and everything. Right. And I think my rewatch experience, I'm kind of waiting, I think, for my husband to watch it because I think he would really love it for the hockey reason and other things. Yeah. And also now he watches hockey, and every time I see hockey come up on the TV,
when do they kiss?
Like, ooh, like what? Totally,
I know.
Like, Heated Rivalry has this spin-off called Hockey. I don't know if you've heard of it. But, you know, there is something interesting about, and I wonder if you guys are going to talk about this on Material Girls, like women as consumers, right? I mean, that demographic is like, women are the ones who will buy books, who will, consume a lot of those things. Like, in a lot of the books that I've written too, there's always a little bit of like, we want to target women, these are the people that buy books, like they'll buy books for men, but the men don't tend to be the ones who are doing the purchasing, right? So women have this purchasing power that's showing up in this interesting way with hockey romance, I guess, and also with this show in particular, like women kind of driving the popularity of this show, and then it being able to extend out into these other places, which is in part one of the places it's extending out to is the real world, right? Like we talked about that real life hockey player coming out and people just being aware of hockey in a different way, and maybe it's bringing some, more female viewers to watching the sport. Like, I don't know, not me. That's a whole other thing. Maybe there's something interesting about that, like why straight women were, and maybe to go with that theory that maybe this show was kind of, it's like a heterosexual romance, but starring men, allowing women to have this distance to watch it and see themselves in it without, and also seeing men being tender and vulnerable in a way that's like not threatening and so on. I mean, there's some interesting stuff going on here about why it's become so popular.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's also maybe not purely coincidental that this is Canadian content going mainstream at a time when the shitty behavior of the American administration is like undeniable. And so I think there's like, I do think there's a desire to gravitate towards things that are good, like content that is well made and that is entertaining, but that you feel a little bit like there's a separation there. It's like it feels a little bit safer to consume Canadian content sometimes, which to be clear, Canada also like a horrifying white supremacist nation. Like for all the things that America does, like Canada also very bad. Very, very bad history, very bad present. And
in some ways we're in the center of it in Alberta as well.
Absolutely. Yes, for sure. And I think that, so I think we're in, no, how do I want to phrase this? I think that the success of the show really shows us that, like, we want genuine queer romance. We want genuine queer stories that don't feed into those, like, cis hetero patriarchal tropes that always have to end in tragedy. We desperately want stories about men who aren't harming women, even incidentally, like I think we really need that. We want that representation of like non-toxic masculinity or tender masculinity. We want that representation of consent. We want to see that like it is actually possible to communicate about sex in a way that is like fun and exciting
and safe. Yeah, I mean, maybe there's something too about this non-toxic masculinity, which I just love this phrase. But that, with everything that's happening in the world, specifically in the US, and just, what Trump has done, and the sort of the incredibly patriarchal, capitalist, white supremacist like way that is going. I like the concept of that from a bit of a wider perspective. This all of this stuff that's happening is the last gasp of patriarchy, right?
I know. I would love for that to be true.
I know, yeah. That it's, a lot of women, feminine people, and so on are finding their power, being in more powerful positions in politics or, making money or whatever it is, and being able to make these changes. We're kind of in this moment where I feel like a lot of women are, choosing to stay single because there are all these statistics that show that single women live longer, tend to be less stressed, healthier, and make more money than married women with children. And for men, it's the inverse, right? So I think there are a lot of people that are fighting against that. And there's this kind of trend against men that, again, could just be my algorithm. But I feel like I see a lot of content that's about, it's kind of, men are the worst and, throw them all out and all this stuff. it's stuff that I'm raising two boys. I have a husband that I love and still feel that way sometimes, right? Like, so you still kind of have these moments where you're just like, oh my God, not necessarily individual men, but patriarchy. Like, can we stop? And so, underneath all of that sort of frustration and vitriol and hatred, maybe there is like this really deep need to see men being human beings and being and being kind to each other and having, just being non-harming, being non-toxic. It's like a non-BPA can or something.
Exactly.
Like a safe container. And maybe that's a part of it, right? Is this sort of deep desire to see men being the human beings that we know they are, right? But sometimes it feels like they're not. Like, I mean, all of this stuff going on with Trump definitely feels like sometimes he can feel non-human in certain ways where,
totally.
I'm pretty sure I already would not be allowed to go over the border with the things that I've said about Trump in the past that have been out there. But, so who cares, on this podcast, what I say, but, there is just this feeling of like, wow, this is somebody who's so full of harm and just has no accountability for any of it. And then, we get to watch this binge, specifically this show, be in this world that we can watch and rewatch and see this going well and people being kind and kind of making the world a better place, right? Like Kip and Scott giving permission to Ilya and Shane, and then
that's right.
What are they going to do next with it, right? It's like this kind of ripple effect of positive behaviors instead of negative ones. Like maybe we desperately need that, not just women, but everybody else too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The guest on Material Girls, Hope Rehak, referred to the show as being great PR for men. Like they like they need it.
They need it. This is the time.
This is the time. Absolutely. And like I have talked I think in our episode about Keanu Reeves, I talked really emphatically about how much we need positive representation. We need positive male role models to in the spotlight. We need it desperately
weight-bearing men, I think was what you
called it.
Load-bearing
men. Yeah. Because some of our children are boys, some of our partners are men, some of our favorite people are men, and we all learn how to be in the world by looking at public figures and figuring out who we are in relation to those public figures. And Me Too was such an impactful time, #MeToo, when everybody talked about all of their experiences of sexual violence and sexual harassment. It was such an impactful moment of realizing, not realizing, because I think we all knew that it was so widespread, but actually seeing it articulated in print, how widespread the violence of patriarchy had been and had become, and not in a historical context, but in a present, everyday, when I go to work, I experience this. When I ride the bus, I experience this. When I'm at home with my spouse, I experience this. It was so massive, and it was an important cultural shift. But as much as we want to say yes, all men, get rid of them, it is 50% of the population. We simply can't. And so being able to say okay, you know what? Pedro Pascal, good. Keanu Reeves, good. Shane and Ilya, good. Is what we're a media saturated landscape. What else can we do except point to positive representation and celebrate positive representation instead of just saying it's sort of like with raising kids. Speaking of emotional labor, you can't just say no. You have to tell them what the correct behavior is.
Right.
And it feels like socially we need a lot of telling men what the correct behavior is.
That's such a good way to put it, actually. I feel like that's so true.
So infantilizing, but I don't know. I don't know how else to frame it.
And on the podcast, I've been doing I have a little masculinity thread that I've been following. And I did an episode about Pedro Pascal, actually. I don't think I used the word load-bearing man, but, you know, from that perspective of like, here's, you know, the one example of a man who's safe and so on, and how dangerous that might be for him, right, in his career, potentially, because that's, you know, load-bearing, right? Like there's a lot of weight on him in terms of that. And what that meant for him as an example of masculinity. And one of the things that we talked about, I was talking with my friend Jeremy Johnston-Kay, who's also a dad, about how maybe Pedro Pascal can be vulnerable and soft and so on, because so many of his roles have been extremely violent, extremely masculine. Like it gives him a pass in a way to be able to be that load-bearing man, right? In the episode that I did on the F1 movie, which is up for an Oscar, which I think is hilarious, Best Picture. Which is a great reason to go back and listen to that podcast episode, but not necessarily to watch the movie, honestly.
Yeah.
It's an interesting one. I don't think it's Oscar fodder. I was having a conversation with my old friend David about that, who's like, masculinity is his thing. And he was talking a lot about initiation and this sort of dearth of positive role models for men. And I think we have this sort of historical movement of feminism, which has come out to say like, okay, we're not going to do it this way anymore. And there have been a lot of these spaces where, you know, women and feminine people have been invited to think about who you are, think about what you want, claim your power, you know, whatever it is, to grow in all of these ways. And in some ways, men have been left out of that conversation or left behind or excluded or isolated or whatever it is. And so now we have incels and all of this extremely toxic masculinity that we're dealing with. Again, maybe last gasp of patriarchy, you know, maybe it's that fight against, you know, something that needs to change. But we do need those role models, right? Like we really do need to see examples of men being non-toxic, non-cancer causing, which is like literal, right? With those statistics of women having worse health outcomes and stuff when they're married to men. You know, let's change that, right? Like it should not have to be that way. And with the parenting podcast that I just did last week with my friend Katie on Night Bitch and everything, like we talked a little bit about how the men in those movies are just useless, right? Like they just come with nothing. And I know you and I have male partners that are not that way, you know, and still there are these heterosexual patriarchal pressures, I think, on our relationships in lots of different kinds of ways. But also like the examples out there are not great, right? And so I think with all of that in mind, I do want to do that rewatch with my husband and see what his experience is like of just seeing this. Like, does he relate to it in the same way? Does he think it's interesting? Like, or is he just like, this isn't for me, forget it? I don't know. I'd be kind of curious to see, right?
Yeah. I mean, I asked Trevor, my partner, if he was interested in watching, and he was like, and I was like, are you afraid of the sex? And he said, I'm afraid of the romance.
Classic masculine response. That's all you need to say, right? Like that's it right there. Yeah. And that's exactly what these characters went through. They were not afraid of the sex. They were afraid of the romance. They were afraid of the emotions, right?
That's exactly right.
And what it means. Yeah. Well, Marcelle, thank you so much for coming and having this chat with me. It's such a pleasure to hang out with you as always and to have you on the podcast.
It was so fun. It was so fun for me.
Yeah, and I am looking really forward to listening to the Material Girls on romance and Heated Rivalry. So, listeners, put that on your list right away.
Oh yeah, definitely. I like Hope Rehak, who was our guest, is so much more knowledgeable than me about about the world of romance and the world of fan fiction and where this phenomenon came from. So I would definitely encourage listeners, if you thought I had anything interesting to say, well, you just buckle up.
I can't wait. I'm so excited. Okay, thank you so much, Marcelle. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. I would love to come back. Please invite me back.
See you soon.
Okay.
Bye. Thanks again, everybody, for listening to this conversation with me and Marcelle Kosman on Heated Rivalry. You can find Marcelle and Material Girls wherever you get your podcasts. She also has another podcast called Gender Playground, which is about gender affirming care for kids. Go check it out. You can find me at Julie Peters Wellness on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Substack. And I'm going to be sharing more and more. I've just joined Substack very recently. So if you like to read, please do follow me there. I have several books that you can get wherever you get your books. You can learn about those at juliepeters.ca. But on Substack, I share a little bit about those, and I'll be sharing a bit about this podcast too. Our next one should be Buffalo 66. We're going to be talking about that again within the romance kind of realm of things, very unconventional romance. I'll be talking to Mel Z about that. So if you haven't watched this movie and you're looking for something to watch, go check it out. It's a cult favorite. People love it. And some people hate it. We'll talk about why. So go check that out. That's next on our list. And there are lots of cool things coming up that we're going to be talking about as well. If you haven't yet watched Night Bitch and If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You, I have an awesome conversation coming up soon with my good friend Katie Thorpe about motherhood and parenting in relationship to those two movies. And I'll be letting you know on Instagram, TikTok, the upcoming films and TV shows and stuff that we're going to be doing so that you can kind of follow along, join us in the conversation. I want your comments. I want your thoughts. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and share this podcast with others and so on. And I look forward to our next chat. Thanks for being here with me.